tunnel. This is my last video in the series from Greece, and I'm finally getting the chance to travel cross-country by train to the mountains of northern Greece and the community of Meteora with its incredible centuries-old hilltop monasteries. And I've got to tell you, I'm excited to be going there. We left Larissa Station in Athens pretty much on time at 7:57 a.m. and if all goes well, it should be about a 4.5-hour trip. Our destination, the town of Kalambaka. Well, I've arrived in Kalambaka, and hats off to Greek National Railways. Very pleasant, smooth ride on time. Now it's time to find where I'm staying. Kalambaka, like the smaller community of Meteora, lies at the foot of the famous monastery-packed rock formations, also known as Meteora. It's a lively yet quiet town with pleasant neighborhoods and a thriving commercial district. And my apartment, which is excellent by the way, although no promotional consideration is involved, is 2 blocks from the center of town and just around the corner from the bus station. I'm taking the public bus, whose hilltop route leaves several times a day and stops at each of the famous monasteries. So I've just exited the bus, the local bus that stops at all of the monasteries as you go up the hill. It's a bit confusing. There's not a whole lot of explanation as to where to get off or which monastery you're approaching. You have to do your homework and ask the driver in advance to let you off. And neither is there a lot of common knowledge, at least from the bus end of it, as to which monasteries are open and which are closed. All of the monasteries except one close 1 day a week. So it's not a sure thing that the monastery you want to see will be necessarily open on a given day. My first stop, the monastery of Varlam. The Varlam monastery was named for a monk who scaled this rock in 1350 and began the task of hauling up materials to build this place. And yet, after his death, the project languished for 200 years until a couple of other monks who happened to be brothers came here to finish the work. Ascetic worshippers, or if you prefer hermit monks, had been drawn to these hilltops since the 12th century. They carved out crude homes in the rocks to live simple lives and carry out their worship undisturbed. But in 1344, a man by the name of Athanasios Koinavides brought a group of monks here from Mount Athos and built the first monastery on what's called Broad Rock, just across the way from me here. The steps carved into these rocks, like the ones I'm using here at the Varlam Monastery, didn't start to appear until the early 20th century. And Queen Marie of Romania made history here in 1921 by becoming the first woman to ever enter one of these monasteries. Of all the beautiful places in Greece, the odd and wonderfully stark sandstone formations here in Meteora are probably the most uniquely so. That would be true if we were only talking about the physical characteristics of the place. But of course, what makes this place so dreamlike and one of a kind are these monasteries that have existed in these dramatic cliff tops for centuries. 24 of them in all, 6 still functioning. Well, I've come from Varlam Monastery, which you see behind me, and I'm headed here, if you can see it, the Rusino Monastery, which is going to be a hike down and back up. It's about 85 degrees Fahrenheit here today, and it's humid. And of course, this is Greece. The sun is very strong. And so it's a pleasure, a break, to be walking through these woods, to get down to a monastery for once instead of up. The Rusino Monastery was built in the 14th century and expanded in the 16th century to include 3 levels. It's one single building, and it uses every available inch of that rock, giving the impression that it was carved out of the cliff. It's believed that it got its name from one of the original hermit monks who occupied the cliff top. At any rate, it suffered severe damage during World War I, and in the 1980s, it became a convent with a population of about a dozen nuns living here ever since.
The nuns clearly know their flowers, but as I found out when I absent-mindedly pulled out my camera in the gift shop, they don't tolerate rule breakers. Oh well, my bad.
The reason for the building boom in monasteries here in the 14th century had everything to do with world events. As the Byzantine Empire came to an end, northern Greece came under threat by Ottoman Turks, especially the vast plain of Thessaly that these hills look down upon for its agricultural potential. Monk communities saw these isolated rocks as a place they could build on top of as a way of self-preservation.
That's especially true of the perch on which the Monastery of the Holy Trinity is built.
These monasteries were intended to be virtually inaccessible, and indeed the monks relied upon ladders that could be drawn up as needed Later they used ropes as a way to segue themselves and their supplies up to the top of these rocks. One luxury that monks who settled this place did not have. That's a cable to carry supplies from across the hill to this lone hill where the Monastery of the Holy Trinity is located. I saw it actually moving from a distance as I approached the place, but now that I'm here, the work is done. Maybe the load of the day has arrived. Well, it's rather a shame that I couldn't show you video inside the monastery because video is not allowed. The Holy Trinity Monastery is actually, I think, the most impressive of the ones that I've seen, in that it conveys a sense of what life may have been like for these early monks who lived here, and those who still do, but it's different today with a stream of visitors coming to the top during certain hours of the day. And also there's a greater solitude here than in some of the others, simply because there aren't as many tourists electing to make the strenuous climb both down the hill and up the rock. It's all about the view. You think one is the best, you go to the next one, it's better. It's just like that here. Well, I could hike up to the final monastery and wait for the bus in about an hour, but I think instead I'll take the trail down the narrow ravine to Kalambaka. I've seen it on a map earlier today, so I'm only guessing that it may be, although steep, not that far, maybe a third of a mile down, or a half mile, maybe more. But it looks like a lot of fun, so here we go. Well, I'm already happy that I made the decision to take this trail. Early payoff. The view from below. Several things you want to keep in mind if you visit here. As I mentioned, there are 6 monasteries still functioning, and 2 of them as nunneries. And they each close on a different day of the week, so it's impossible to visit all of them in a single day. In fact, I wouldn't even recommend it. Unless you have more than one day here, visit 2 or 3, maybe 4, and take it slow. You'll enjoy it. And one other thing, you can sign up to any of the commercial tours that are available here. In my case, I opted to go to the local bus station in Kalambaka for a bus that runs here several times a day, circulating through the monastery route, and that costs less than €2. It's also, in my opinion, a superior way to see the monasteries, because you can get off at the place you choose, and once you're up on the rocks, up in the hills, it's not strenuous at all to walk along the highway from one monastery access point to the next. At the end, you can wait for the bus, or you can do as I'm doing, take the trail back down through the ravine. There's not an overabundance, shall we say, of information about how to approach a monastery visit here. That could be improved, but many people are on tours anyway, and I think that's the reason. But if you're an independent traveler, don't hesitate at all to come here and make your way on foot. This trail is so pleasant. Now I'm debating whether to get up in the morning and hike back up here for sunrise. And now Kalambaka is beginning to come into view just over the trees. Well, I wasn't going to mention this at the top, but I lost my water bottle about an hour and a half before descending. So I promised myself all the way I would stop at the first store and buy a liter bottle of water. Well, I'm back in Kalabaka. I've come to the first store, but it isn't a store, it's a taverna. And I've fixed my thirst with a fix beer. And at this moment, this is the best beer I've ever tasted.
I didn't hike back up the trail for sunrise. I took an early morning stroll around town instead.
Kalimera.
Hello.
Hello.
As I mentioned earlier, this is my last video from Greece. If you've missed any of them, I invite you to check them out. And let me take this moment to thank those of you who subscribe to the channel and who like the videos. After touring Turkey, Albania, and Greece, I'm headed home to the US for a bit. But I hope to see you soon from another part of the world that I think you're really going to enjoy. Until then, ciao and peace.